In my last video, I spoke briefly about the value of making compost. In this region of Maryland, we have a lot of heavy clay soil. At one time, this was deciduous forest with beautiful topsoil, and the farmers came in, they took out the trees, they grew crops, they ran pasture. Eventually the builders came in and put in houses, and all that was left is this. It's a very heavy clay. I can crumble it right now because it's winter, and this is actually better than it was when we moved in because this area has been under trees for a long time. But it's a very heavy, poorly draining soil, and so adding compost really seems to make a big difference. You could use this to make pottery if you wanted. If you mix together the right ingredients with that clay, you can turn it into this. It's still not as good as you could get in a bag from a garden center, but it's good. You can see how far I can push that shovel in, and this soil hasn't been turned in 6 months. But how do we go from clay to this? That's the question. I have an overly complicated system, and I'll go through the details a little at a time. It all starts with a scrap bucket in the kitchen. From the scrap bucket it goes to the compost tumbler. From the compost tumbler it goes to the compost pile, and then it ends up here in my 4-bin compost system. With the aid of some low budget animation, I'll reveal my composting system. The ingredients I use at each stage of composting varies based on how quickly they break down, and also trying to balance carbon items with nitrogen-rich items, which is difficult depending on the time of the year, which you can get most of. Today I'm going to fill compost bin number 4. That one is the first one in the series, which gives the material the most time to break down. First thing we're going to use for that is some shredded leaves from last fall. Next, we'll add some compost from bin number 3 as a culture starter for this bin. Next, we'll add a layer of used coffee grounds and filters from Project Natalia. A special shout out to Shirley for helping make this a success. getting about 5 pounds dry weight of coffee grounds a week. And you can do that too. You just need to find a coffee shop or office building where they brew a lot of coffee and they're willing to let you pick up the used coffee grounds. Just make sure you show up when you say you're going to show up, so they're willing to help in this movement towards a greener world. It's just one more thing we can use to make the soil better. There is some concern that too many coffee grounds could make the compost highly acidic. So to combat that, I'll be adding some homemade low-quality biochar and wood ashes. And maybe a little hot dog grease. Next, we'll add a bag of well-rotted horse manure from the local horse rescue. I only add horse manure to bin number 4 because of the fear of persistent herbicides. We've had a problem with that about 4 or 5 years ago. Somehow it got into our garden and we had a lot of problems with our tomatoes. So if you're interested in that, you can just run a search on it, amino pyralids in gardens. For us, it's just a matter of letting the ground sit another year, and that was fine. So in this case, all of the manure that goes into bin number 4 will be in the composting system for a whole year before it ends up in the garden, and we will actually test some plants in it before we shovel it out. And the last thing I'll add is a layer of dirt from my compost pile, which has a lot of rough vegetative matter that came out of the gardens last year, kitchen scraps and that sort of thing. And I'll repeat that process 3 or 4 more times, and that'll finish filling the bin. I'll do that over a period of the next couple of weeks. So that filled the compost bin about halfway. I already had a little less than a quarter in there, so it will take 2 or 3 more fills for it to be overflowing. And we want to fill it to overflowing because it's going to settle a lot in the decomposition process. Over here in bin number 1, which is finished compost, you can see it's settled. I originally had that filled to overflowing, and now it's down about 20% from the top edge. So that means the bin is holding right now about 14 cubic feet of compost, which I will use in the garden. A lot of young people today are worried that the older generation has destroyed the earth and they're doomed. But the reality is, if we just got rid of people, in 1,000 years this would be deciduous forest with wonderful soil. Problem is, I can't wait that long, so I compost, and you can too, and that's the real value of compost. It's not the dollars per cubic foot. It's the fact that you're building your soil. It's like a savings account for the future, and you won't be the only one to use it. But the people who follow after you will be glad you did. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.